She vanished the night we were supposed to run away, and 4 decades later, she knocked on my door, standing beside a grown man who had my eyes and my father's stubborn chin. Hey, folks, it's Jack from Mind-Blowing Stories. Before I get into this one, I've got to say it plain. 96% of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed. 96. That number sits in my chest like a lost dog in a thunderstorm. And I'm not ashamed to admit it makes this old guy a little sad. If you like true tales that tilt your heart and mess with your expectations, please hit subscribe, tap that like button, and leave me a comment. Tell me if you'd have done what I did. All right. Deep breath. Here we go. I grew up in Marietta, Ohio, where the river bends like a lazy elbow and the smell of cut grass and hot tar means summer. My dad worked swing shifts at the bearings plant, and I followed him straight out of high school in '76 because that's what you did. The music of that place was steel ringing and forklifts beeping and the hiss of airlines. We had our own language numbers chalked on pallets, nicknames you didn't ask to earn. I was 19 with a pocket full of calluses and a head full of plans I didn't dare say out loud. My plan at the time looked like a midnight bus south and a guitar in Nashville. But if you'd known me then, you'd have thought I'd never leave the county line. Then came Maggie Hart. I met her on the 4th of July parade route when a float stalled in front of the Dairy Queen. She was at the curb with a paper fan from her church, laughing at the way a tuba player tried to march in place. There's a laugh you remember forever because it sounds like something you were missing and didn't know it. That was hers. Maggie wore her hair in a simple ponytail and a sundress the color of sweet tea, and when I looked at her, I felt steady and unsteady at the same time. She said her name and shook my hand, and I swear a ring of heat circled my wrist for the rest of the day. Her dad was Pastor Hart at First Baptist, strict as a plumb line and twice as unbending. I didn't know that at first. I knew only the little private facts you collect when you're falling fast. The tiny scar at the edge of her eyebrow, where she hit the corner of a bookshelf as a kid. The way she folded napkins into perfect triangles. The way she checked a room for exits out of habit, not fear. She was going to Columbus for nursing school in the fall. I was supposed to be saving for a used Chevy and a nicer apartment for me and my mom if Dad finally did what he kept threatening and left. We fell in love like it was our job. Sneaking pie at the River Queen Diner, parking behind the high school baseball field to watch lightning bugs stitch the summer dark. I told her about Nashville, and she told me about a dream to work at a children's hospital where the walls are painted so bright kids don't forget how to laugh. We didn't say forever. We just breathed it. The trouble started as gentle as a smudge. We were on the porch swing at her house one Sunday night after church, just long enough to get caught in the crosshairs of porch light and fireflies, when the front door opened and Pastor Hart stepped into the frame like he owned the air. He didn't raise his voice. The quiet made the words worse. Inside, Margaret. Now. He didn't look at me. He looked through me, the way a storm looks past one house to the next county over. Maggie squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt before she went inside. Her message was in that squeeze, I'm not leaving because I want to. The next day, she found me at lunch behind the plant, balancing a thermos on a stack of skids. She had a bruise under one eye where makeup tried and failed to hide it. I stood up so fast the thermos rolled and clanged. She put her palm on my chest to steady me. It's not what you think, she said, arguing. I opened a cabinet and it swung back. She was protecting him and I knew it. I also knew this wasn't something I'd fix with a wrench and a good cussing. 2 nights later, we sat under the bleachers at an American Legion baseball game and built a plan like little kids stacking Duplo bricks. She couldn't stay at home. The fall in Columbus was still weeks away and some lines were snapping taut. My dad had an on-again, off-again truce with me in anger, but he loved my mom and me in the way men of his time did through work and fixing things and not talking about feelings. I told him enough to get him on the side of, Something's got to change. He said if I was running, run quiet. We picked a date. Saturday night. She'd meet me at the Greyhound station in Parkersburg, 2 towns over. Midnight bus anywhere. But ultimately Nashville, because why not begin in the direction we dreamed? The day of ran through like a fever. The plant was loud and the clock was stubborn. I packed a duffel behind the seat of my truck with more cassette tapes than socks. Mom kissed my cheek and told me not to be stupid right after she told me I was the best boy she ever knew. My dad pretended to search for his lighter until he could say, "Don't look backward when you push the gas," which was his way to say good luck. But on the way out of town, Marietta tried to hold me by the ankle. There was a small fire at the plant, nothing compared to what made the papers in bigger cities, but enough to send me whipping my truck around at the sound of the siren. The night guard was my old shop teacher's brother. He'd fallen in the hurry and cracked his head. I was the first one there. I pulled him out with 2 other guys who had the same dumb hero reflex. The smoke beat me up. My eyebrows singed off. My lungs whistled like a kettle. By the time the fire truck arrived and the guard was okay fine, thank God, the red digits on my dashboard clock were saying, "You're late," in a language louder than English. I drove like a man chased by his own choices. I slid into the Parkersburg station 12 minutes past midnight. If you've ever run the last stretch with your heart in your throat, you know how it is. Everything too small and too bright. I looked for her, looked again. The benches were empty, but for a man sleeping with his hat over his face, and a teenage girl with a suitcase covered in stickers that said places I wanted to see. No Maggie. I asked the ticket clerk. He shook his head. No one by that name. I sat down and told myself, wait 5 minutes, then 5 more, then until the next bus. Dawn crept up the windows and the teenage girl's stickers changed color in the light. Somewhere around 5 a.m. Now, when even the vending machine looked tired, a woman in a navy suit with a church smile sat beside me and asked if I was Jack. I said I was. "She won't be coming," the woman said. "This is all I'm to deliver." She handed me an envelope with my name written in Maggie's hand. I knew her loops and lines like I knew my own. The paper smelled like her lemon shampoo. My hands shook so badly I tore the corner wrong. The note was 5 lines long. "Jack, I'm sorry. I can't go. This is my choice. Please don't come to the house. Please don't write. Please live your life. No, I love you." No explanation. Just those clean little knife edges of sentences. The woman in the navy suit squeezed my shoulder and said, "It's better like this," as if she knew any piece of me. I drove home in a straight line that felt like falling. You think you know how heartbreak works. You think it's big, salty tears and grand gestures outside windows. For me, it was quiet. I went to work. I drank too much after work. I started telling my guitar to shut up when it tried to sing the first bar of anything. I would have driven to her house anyway and pounded on the door if Dad hadn't said he'd lock me in the shed himself. "You don't chase someone who tells you not to," he said, though his jaw clenched like it wanted to fight somebody. A month later, the rumors reached me the way rumors do in small towns. Sideways and sticky. Maggie had gone to stay with an aunt in Knoxville. Then the rumor got a new coat of paint. She left with the son of a deacon, and no one knew where. Then somebody's cousins swore they saw her on a bus to Chicago. I stopped collecting stories because they all tasted the same. Life forked anyway. I married a woman named Karen 2 years later, because a person wants to put their feet somewhere solid. Karen was a good person who didn't like to be held. When she cried and preferred a clean counter to flowers. We had a son, Michael. He was the best thing either of us ever did. He came home from the hospital with a shock of hair standing straight up, like he'd been surprised to meet the world. I stopped drinking after he knocked the glass off a side table once, and the shatter scared him. It wasn't a Hollywood moment. It was a Tuesday. Turns out Tuesdays can save you. But you can love the life you built and still ache for a ghost. That's the truth I didn't say out loud back then. Karen knew I had a shadow. Maybe she had one too. We lasted 18 years. That's a good stretch by any measure. We divided the furniture like people do. Friendly until we weren't, and then friendly again for Michael's sake. I lived alone for a while in a one-bedroom place, with a balcony too small for chairs, only big enough to stand and watch the weather. Time rolled on. Dad passed in '03 after a stroke, sudden as a dropped plate. Mom shrank into a quiet version of herself that same year, like someone turned down her volume. I retired from the plan at 61, a forklift driver with bad knees and a decent pension, and tried to figure out what a day looks like without a clock above your head. To keep from talking only to the television, I started this channel. Mind-blowing stories, I called it, with a chuckle at my own nerve. I thought I'd tell stories from the plant, or about the time my buddy Ricky swore a squirrel stole his car keys, or how my great-uncle claimed to have seen a river monster. Then the world got sick, and folks were stuck at home, and somehow a couple of my videos caught wind. The comments were like strangers opening their kitchen doors and inviting me in for coffee. In 2010, while we were trying to get Mom to take her pills on time, I found the first twist in this story, the one that tilted everything. We were cleaning out her closet, and I reached up to the top shelf, and my hand landed on a shoebox with an elastic band around it. Inside were letters, a stack, tied with ribbon, yellow as an old bruise. The handwriting on the envelopes punched the breath out of me. They were from Maggie. I sat on the floor and opened one, then another, then another. They started the week after the night I waited at the bus station and never saw her. They were full of love and confusion and fear and apology. They were also full of details. Not the kind a liar uses, the kind you can see. The way the halls smelled of bleach at a home for unwed mothers. The sound of rain on a chapel roof at 3 a.m. The feel of a nurse's hand that was both rough and kind. She said she'd been sent away. She said she was carrying my child. She said she had no say in the matter of where the baby would go or when she'd be allowed to come home. She said her father opened every letter she tried to send and either burned them or sent them back with verses underlined. She said she found a way to mail these from the laundromat when the woman watching the hall fell asleep on the dryer. She begged me to come. Then, in letters later, she begged me not to come because harm might happen if I did. All that time they were in a shoebox above my mother's good coats. I walked into the kitchen with the stack like it might explode. Mom sat at the table, small and bird-like, tapping a sugar packet against the wood. She looked up and saw the letters and put her hand over her mouth. Then she said the thing I did not know how to live with. He asked me. She meant Pastor Hart. He came to the house and asked me to do the Lord's work and keep my boy from ruining his life. He said there had been a mistake, and the girl was not for you. He said he would handle it. She paused and her face did a terrible thing. This collapse I've only ever seen once. Like a person realizes they were driving and fell asleep, and now they've woken up inside a dented car. I thought I was buying you a future. I was wrong. I am so sorry, Jack. She cried the rest of the afternoon. I sat on the floor between the stove and the refrigerator and read every letter until the words were swimming. That night I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere past 2 a.m., I got up, poured coffee I didn't need, and picked the letter that had the worst tremble in the ink. It had a date on it from 1979. I will love you whether you come or not, she wrote. I will name him Eli if I am allowed. If I am not allowed, I will write his true name in my heart and hum it to him when they're not looking. I tried to find her. I called the church and got a polite secretary who said Pastor Hart had passed away in the 90s. I asked if there were records of where his daughter had gone. She said she'd check and call me back. She didn't. I hired one of those online people finders. You know, the kind that charge you a surprising amount to tell you there are 432 people with the same name living in the Midwest. I made trip after trip to the attic where I found that box, as if the next time it might yield a phone number or an address that had somehow printed itself while I slept. Life, stubborn as ever, kept on. My son married a school counselor and moved to Cleveland. He gave me a granddaughter who arrived wanting to climb everything. Mom passed in her sleep in the fall of 2011 with my hand in hers. After the funeral, I drove to a lake and yelled at the water until my voice sounded like gravel. Then I drove home and put the letters back in their shoebox and set it on my dresser. I told myself I'd keep looking, but there are days you can't do more than make a sandwich and try not to drop it. If this was a movie, the next part would be a montage. Me teaching myself how to film with my phone, the channel growing, me laughing at silly comments, me interviewing my neighbor about the time a possum got into her pantry. Behind all of it was the steady thrum. Where are you, Maggie? Are you happy? Does he exist? Is he well? The room felt emptier when the video stopped and I saw my own face in the black screen, and the lines at the corners of my eyes had new stories. Then came the knock. It was a Saturday in late September, the kind where Ohio finally admits summer's over. I was making chili and arguing with the radio in that good way you argue when you're alone. The knock was 3 firm raps. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door, and there she was. Maggie Hart. Older, of course, because time had walked across both our faces, but it was her. The same left eyebrow with that little scar, the same mouth that took its time before it smiled. And the person standing beside her, a man in his 30s, looked so much like my old driver's license photo that it knocked something off my spine. He had my father's chin, my sister's eyes, a crease in his cheek that shows up only when he's trying not to show he's nervous. I don't remember the first sentence I said. If memory is a pie, that slice is gone. I remember letting them in and forgetting to turn off the burner, and chili sputtering behind us, while we stood in the living room like people in a museum trying not to stand too close to the painting. Then Maggie spoke first. Jack, she said, just my name, like a prayer and a question. I started, then stopped. I couldn't even get to hello. This is Eli, she said, resting her hand on the man's shoulder. Our son, Eli. The word walked straight out of 1979 and into my house. He put out his hand. His grip was warm and strong, not too much. Hi, he said. Then, I've rehearsed a better first sentence 100 times, but it turns out the real ones come out like this. He laughed, and there it was, my laugh. A little higher, a little faster. We sat at the kitchen table and turned off the chili and let silence do the math. Then everything came in pieces. They had found me because Eli did one of those DNA kits last Christmas. He had always known he was adopted. He'd had good parents, he said. Loving. His dad had passed the year before. His mom lived in Knoxville and made quilts that looked like the inside of a kaleidoscope. The DNA kit flagged a second cousin of mine I hardly know, and they started down the chain, like kids playing a sidewalk game to see if the cracks line up. Eli had looked for his birth mother off and on for years. Records sealed, then unsealed just enough. When he finally found Maggie 3 summers ago, they had their own shock and healing. He asked about me. She told him the stories she knew, the boys she loved, the night they were supposed to run, the church's grip, the home for unwed mothers with strict women who used scripture as both balm and weapon. She said she wrote me letters. She believed I never wrote back. She believed I moved on without a backward glance. She said the word believed. Like you say a word that used to be true and isn't anymore. Your mother saved them, I said, and went to the bedroom and brought out the shoebox like it was a relic. We opened it together. I watched Maggie read her own handwriting, the way you'd watch somebody meet a younger version of themselves in a train station. She touched a sentence with her finger, smiling in a way that hurt to see, and then cried, quiet and fierce, like she didn't want to waste a drop. I cried too. Eli sat with us and did what good men do when they don't know how to fix it. He stayed. When we could speak again without our voices breaking, Maggie told me the part I'd guessed and the part I hadn't. The aunt in Knoxville was real. The home was real. The kind of place that believed shame could be useful. She had the baby in February. Alone except for a nurse, she says, saved her with kindness. They placed him in her arms for a moment and took him away. She begged to keep him long enough to sing. They let her. She hummed a tune without words, because she was afraid to put into the air anything they could forbid. She whispered the name she'd promised in a letter Eli in his ear. She said she had that one moment like a stone in her pocket, something she could rub when the rest of life felt too smooth and nothing to hold. After the church, her father told her to forget me and forget what they called the trouble. They praised her for doing the right thing. They set her down in a pew and rolled the world over her like a steamroller. She went to nursing school anyway because she's brave in the ways that don't ask for applause. She became the kind of nurse you remember. When Eli found her, she was working at a clinic that treated people nobody else wanted to treat. She knew too well what it felt like to need something and be told you didn't deserve it. We didn't sleep that night. We talked and talked, the kind of conversation that stitches two time zones together. Late, when the house was dark and the chili was long cold, Eli reached into his backpack and pulled out a letter with the slanted, careful handwriting of a man trying not to let emotion show through ink. This is from my dad, my adoptive dad, Eli said. He left it for me. Told me to open it when I felt ready to look for you. Jack, this is for you. My hands shook again when I opened it, because apparently that's what I do when paper is about to change my life. The letter was short. Eli's dad, Tom, wrote that he'd known from the moment they brought baby Eli into his arms that he was holding a miracle borrowed, not owned. He wrote that if Eli ever found his first family, he wanted to say thank you to the boy and girl who loved him into the world, despite a church that did not. He wrote that he hoped I was kind and that if I wasn't, he trusted Eli to walk away and build his own table. He wrote one last line that I still carry around like a spare key. You saved me, son. Becoming your father saved me. May you be saved 1,000 times by the people you meet. There are parts of this story I still haven't told you. Not because I want to be coy, but because even now the ground feels like it shifts when I say it. One, the way I almost met Maggie without knowing, years before our knock at the door moment. My mother, you remember, was in and out of the hospital during her last years. There was a nurse there with a calm voice who taught me how to help Mom stand without hurting her hips. Her name tag read M. Hart. I didn't look up. I didn't look up. That's the sentence I throw at myself in the quiet sometimes. I didn't look up and see the scar on the eyebrow or the way her mouth curved when she listened. It was Maggie. She recognized my name on the chart, she told me later. She recognized my hands. But standing there with my mother between us, with my history, like a pile of broken dishes at our feet, she chose to keep all of us steady and let the moment pass. She said she went home that night and cried into her dish towel and made peace with God again in the morning and went back to work. I can't decide if I'm grateful or furious at the timing. Maybe both. Maybe that's what adulthood is. Room for two truths. Two. The day after the knock, I had what my doctor later called a small heart event, which is a ridiculous phrase, like calling a tornado a spirited breeze. I started to say something and instead said nothing at all and slid down the front of my stove like the world tilted in the wrong direction. It was Maggie who kept me here. This woman, whose hands learned gentleness in rooms where no one wanted to be, did what she's trained to do. She took my pulse. She barked instructions to Eli like a field sergeant. She called emergency services and said, with a steady tone that told me she'd done this 1,000 times, the things that matter when seconds are coins. In the ambulance, she kept her face where I could see it. "Stay with me," she said, and I did. In the hospital, after the stent and the speech about diets and walking and the tonic effect of granddaughters, she put her forehead against mine and said, "You don't get to leave the second time we found you." I've promised not to. 3. Forgiveness is not a switch. It's a dimmer. You slide it up a notch at a time. I had to forgive my mama. Then I had to forgive that part of me that liked her plan because it kept me safe, even while it kept me sad. I had to forgive a church for its crushing certainty. I had to forgive the boy I was for not breaking down the heart's front door and making a scene they could not control. And I had to forgive time for being a stubborn old mule that dragged us here by the slow road. If you're wondering about the love story part, if two older people can find a way to be a new kind of young, the answer is yes. But not in the movie way with a big brass band and a montage of us wearing matching sweaters. We take walks around the reservoir and tell the truth. We sit at the kitchen table and let the silence do its good work. We sleep sometimes back to back because that's what our bones like. We keep separate houses because space can be a kindness at our age. We learned each other's medications the way younger couples learn favorite songs. We drive to Knoxville once a month to see Eli's mother, Tom's widow, and eat her pies that are better than any sermon I've ever heard. And we laugh. Oh, how we laugh. At commercials that try too hard. At how we both say "whoosh" sometimes, like our grandmothers. At my inability to fold a fitted sheet despite 66 years on the planet. There was one last twist. Isn't there always? We went back to First Baptist together one hot Sunday morning, not to stir up trouble, but to set our own feet in that space as the older, braver people we've become. The sanctuary smelled the same, old books and lemon oil and maybe a little mildew. The pastor was a gentle young woman with a voice like a creek. She preached about mercy. I thought that was a joke God tells when God is feeling funny. After the service, the pastor asked if we were visiting family. I said something about long stories and boxes of letters. She tilted her head. "You're Jack," she said, "and you're Margaret. I've read about you. We must have both looked startled. She led us to the little church library, a room that maybe used to be a closet. She pulled down an old Bible with a cracked spine. Inside was a folded note, brittle with age. "We found this when we replaced the pew Bibles a few years back," she said. "We didn't know if we should keep it in the archives or burn it. We keep it. It was a letter, written in the same hand I saw in the marriage records from the 70s, when Dr. Somebody was marrying and burying everybody. But the signature was the one that stopped me. Reverend Thomas Hart, Maggie's father. He'd left a note between pages you might call coincidence, but I don't. He wrote that he had done what he thought was right at the time. He wrote that fear had been his shepherd, not love. He wrote that he had told himself he was saving his daughter, and instead, he nearly broke her. He wrote that if this letter was ever found, the reader should know he wanted to give back what he had taken, but he hadn't known how to return time. It was not a plea for absolution. It was the sort of confession a man makes when he's talking mostly to himself and hoping that God is the kind of person who eavesdrops. Maggie trembled while she read. Then she held that letter like it weighed 1,000 pounds and a feather. "This doesn't fix anything," she said, "but it means he found his mirror before the end." We stood in the library a long time. The pastor led us. Some silences in this life are thin and empty. This one was thick and full, like bread. We went to the cemetery that afternoon and stood in front of the hearthstone. We didn't deliver speeches. We weren't there to win an argument with the dead. We stood and let the day push over us. On the way back to the car, Maggie took my hand. "I loved you then," she said. "I love you now." The then and the now are different kinds of love. I'm grateful for both. If you want to know what it feels like to finally understand what adult love is, that sentence might be the best definition I can give you. Eli is in our lives like a sunrise that decides to stay all day. He calls me Jack mostly, sometimes Dad, when the word comes out on its own and startles us both, and we grin like idiots. He works as a high school counselor, which makes a clean circle in the map if you think about it. A child who is loved from a distance, teaching kids how to be loved up close. He and his wife brought me a toddler grandson who found my old guitar in the closet and insisted I make it talk. I do, carefully, gentle on the strings. I finally took the guitar out of its case after years, not to chase a dream in Nashville, but to teach a little boy to touch something delicate and make sound. Some of you will ask in the comments what I would go back and change. I know because you're kind and you think about time like a sweater you could unpick and do over. Here's my answer, and I'll say it like I'm saying it to just you. I would have looked up at the nurse's name tag during those hospital days and let the world fall where it had to. I would not have trusted anyone who told me that fear is the same as love. I would have gone to the laundromat in Knoxville and put quarters in every dryer until I found the one that heard her song. But if I undid all those knots, I don't know if I'd have this exact grandson laughing on my floor or this exact quiet with Maggie on the porch in the evening. Regret and gratitude sit at the same table, drinking the same coffee. You can make room for both. I tell this story because some of you are carrying shoeboxes, literal or not, and you don't know what to do with them. Start by opening them. Read the truth even if your hands shake. Then tell someone. Tell me if you want. That's what this little channel's become, believe it or not. A place at the end of the internet where a retired forklift driver opens letters with strangers, and nobody laughs at anybody's handwriting. We filmed a little bit of that first night, after the tears stopped breaking over us like small waves. I asked them if they would mind if I told the story one day. "Tell it," Eli said. "Tell it so some other person doesn't think they're the only one." We didn't post anything then. We waited until the day felt like ours again. I held that decision the way you hold an egg, careful to keep it whole. Now here I am telling you, across a screen I've cleaned 3 times while I talked, because old habits die hard and smudges bother me. If you stuck around this long, thank you. It's a strange thing to say into a lens, what you've barely learned how to say into your own pillow. But I can hear you in your kitchens and garages, nodding or shaking your heads, forgiving the parts you recognize and questioning the parts you don't. I will end where I started, with a knock at the door. Whenever I get low, when the night is the kind that insists on counting up your mistakes, I replay that sound. 3 knocks. I remind myself there is no age at which life stops surprising you. Sometimes the surprise is a bill or a diagnosis. Sometimes it is your first love and your grown son shivering your name in the space between Chili and the front hall. If you felt something listening to this, if a shoebox flashed across your mind, or a porch swing, or an empty bus station bench, let me know. Hit that like button. Drop a comment and tell me the decision you wish you'd made and the one you're proud of, both. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. I know I said it at the top, but I'll say it again because it matters to this old heart. 96% of you who watch aren't subscribed. It truly makes me sad. Help me turn that number into a story with a better ending. We'll meet here again next week. I'll bring something worth your time. You bring yourself and maybe a shoebox you're ready to open.